Hey Mets fans, Emily Reppert here. Well, as the New York Mets celebrate 60 years of baseball, we are sitting down with alumni to talk about the team's history and their personal experiences. And today we are with 1969 World Series champion Ed Kranepool. Ed, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you. On a beautiful day, it's a pleasure to be here.
Beautiful day, Ed. We are here in beautiful Boca Raton, but I know your story started way back in New York, same place as the New York Mets. What was it like growing up in New York and then signing with this brand new franchise right in your own backyard?
Well, it's something that I wanted to do from early on. I was a player in Little League. I played 3 years in Little League baseball, and as a young kid, the one thing I wanted to be was a Major League Baseball player, and I'd certainly got an opportunity years later. But being from the Bronx, I was a Yankee fan, and I watched them play all the time. I wasn't much of a National League fan with the Giants and Dodgers, but when the Mets came around, they followed me in high school, and 2 days after graduation, I was in California, and opening night for my record, it was Sandy Koufax on the mound. He pitched a no-hitter and struck out 13, and I said I was going to have a long career, and I did.
So many kids, I'm sure, growing up that want to be professional athletes, also a dream to get to play in their hometown. So to sign in New York, was that something important to you to get to play for the hometown team?
I was a fan of the New York baseball. Obviously, I watched the Yankees for so many years, and then when the Mets came around, I knew the opportunity would be there with a young club, and they were drafting older players in the first year, and I knew there was an opportunity to get there in a hurry. I didn't realize that I was going to get there 2 days after graduating high school. So it made it a little tough for me. It made learning in the major leagues difficult. Playing at home was difficult. It's a lot more difficult playing in your own home city for the simple reason that all your fans and all your friends know you. They followed your career, and they know what you can do as a Sandlot player. Now you get to the major leagues, and you're competing against the greatest players in the world. And back in the 60s, baseball didn't have as many teams, so the opportunities weren't there. So that's why I chose the Mets. I wanted to get a chance to get to the major leagues.
I love that. And you talked about, playing baseball your whole life, Little Leagues growing up, but you also played basketball, right? What was it about baseball where you knew this is the sport that I want to pursue?
Well, I loved it. I loved baseball as a youngster. I could hit, and that was the key to baseball. That's the fun of the game, learning how to hit and developing and running around. And you know what? It's great to hear the crowd. And New York has the greatest sports fans around. When they came out and supported the Mets in the early years, they didn't have a good product. They had a bad product, a lot of older players at the twilight of their career, and they didn't win very often. I had 7 bad years of 100 losses. And one year we had 90-something, and very close to 100, so we broke that record, and then we won the World Series in '69. And that changed everything, because 60 years later, people are still talking about the early years of the Mets, the World Series early on, and of course later on they won again. But the fans in New York are great. They support you. I have people talking, yelling out of the buses. I have bus drivers opening the doors when I walked down New York, and it was great. It was tough leaving New York after all these years, but I moved to Florida, and it's been a great winter so far.
Yeah, I mean, you can't complain about this. So we want to know a little bit about those early years, the Mets franchise. 1962, the Mets' first spring training. You're there as a 17-year-old. What is that experience like?
Well, I actually joined the ball club in June of '62. I didn't join them early on because we graduated. And of course I had Casey Stengel, who was the leader of the squad. And he developed, he had a lot of older players, the ex-Dodgers, the ex-Giants. He had whoever they could pick up that had some kind of notoriety in New York. And of course the fans supported the club in the beginning. They came out to see the losing Mets. They drafted the fellows from the Yankees like Marv Throneberry came over. He had a following. So it was a ball club that was really developing. They knew it was going to take a couple of years. They knew, the players they had, they were at the twilight of their careers, but they brought the stars back to New York. They brought Duke Snider back in the early years, Roger Craig back in the early years. And, it was a lot of fun. Playing under Casey, you couldn't forget it. And he was, the leader of a ball club that struggled, and he took the pressure off the players. He directed the press. he got them around him after the games and took some of the pressure. But he was a great guy because he never ridiculed the players. He knew they had liabilities. And, he tried to develop, and he loved the young players. So he took a liking to the young players as they were being added to the ball club. Me being the first one, and then after that we had a nucleus of young guys coming up every spring. I think next guy was probably Cleon Jones, and then you had Ron Swoboda, you had Tug McGraw, and then we got into the middle years in the 60s, and we had Tom Seaver coming up. Tom Seaver and Jerry Kuzman and that whole crowd and that nucleus of a great pitching staff, and that turned the organization around. But Casey was there to see all the guys, and he would always try to help the young guys. He made you sit alongside of them. And he wasn't the comical fool that the fans thought he was. Mm-hmm. He did that to distract the fans, not to alienate the players. And he put pressure on himself to really entertain the fans. And he only wanted one guy doing that. We had one guy that tried to upstage Casey in our early years, and that was Jimmy Pearsall. And by the time he ran the bases backwards and he got between third and home, Casey was up on the top step, and to welcome Jimmy Pearsall. And Jimmy thought he was going to get his hand shaking, and Casey thinking it was a great idea. And Casey, next day, shipped him out and got rid of him. Yeah. Because he only wanted to be the leader, and he wanted all the attention.
Right. Are there any particular stories about Casey that stand out, your relationship with him?
Well, it was great. I tell you what, he took good care of me. He sat me right alongside of him on the first night when Sandy Koufax was pitching, and he says, "You want to be in this ball game?" And as a young player, you say yes. But you know what? It's tough. It's tough developing in New York, but he tried. He would take me in the outfield. He wanted me to learn the outfield early on. He had Gil Hodges as my personal tutor. Gil was with the ball club, and he wound up teaching me how to play first base correctly. Because a lot of guys make mistakes, and I even watch now the game being played, and guys have bad footwork around first base, and you can point it out because I had a great teacher in Gil, and of course later on, he came back as my manager in '68, and I had my ups and downs, but he was a great manager.
But he had your back.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just getting the big league call-up. Your minor league career was 40-some games, 3 different ball clubs, I think. So what was that span like, that whirlwind of a minor league career and then getting the call-up?
Well, what happened was I went to California to join the ball club and stayed there a couple of weeks. And didn't play a whole lot because Casey was trying to introduce me to the major leagues. He put me in late in the ball game and, let me substitute for some guys. And then they felt they wanted to send me to the minor leagues, rightfully so. When you're 17, you're not ready to face Koufax and Drysdale and Marichal and the Hall of Fame pitchers that are out there, the Bob Gibsons. So they sent me to the minors, but they didn't have any clubs. We had one minor league club in Auburn. So they first sent me to Syracuse, which was a AAA club that they shared with the Washington Senators. So I went there, stayed about 2 weeks, and the next thing I know they said, well, now we'll try you from AAA, we'll try you in AA. And they sent me down to Knoxville, which happened to be a Detroit Tiger chain. So when I arrived there, their first baseman was supposedly hurt. By the time I got there, Frank Coswell was the manager. And he said, Ed, what are you doing here? He says, you're with the Mets. I said, I know, but they sent me down to fill in for one of your first basemen that hurt. They said, well, I can't play you. He said, you're not going to get in the ball game. You can come out early for batting practice. So I stayed in Knoxville for about 3 weeks, and Johnny Murphy, who was our vice president, came down to look at what I was doing. And he looked at the scorecards, and he said, Ed, you don't have an at-bat. I said, well, I knew from day one. I said, the manager told me he couldn't play me. I wasn't in their organization.
Yeah.
I said, maybe he was going to trade me or something. I didn't know what was going on. But took a lot of batting practice, so they decided you'll leave Knoxville and you'll go to Auburn, which is the Mets' only facility that they had. They had a team there. All the young players were there. That's where they probably should have sent me in the beginning. It would have been better. Well, we wound up winning the championship, and I hit .350, and then I got called up to the major leagues in September again that year and finished it out. And that was really the start. And the next year I went to spring training, which was in beautiful St. Petersburg at the time, and They played me in spring, and George Weiss was the manager, or the general manager from the old Yankees days, and he wanted to send me out early, but Casey said, no, let's play this young kid. Looks like he's got a pretty good swing. And I wound up hitting over 300 in the spring.
Wow.
And George wanted to send me out towards the end, and Casey said, why should I send him out? He's my best hitter. I need some hitters, and we'll put him on there. But they had too many first basemen. So they said, let's put him in the outfield. So he tried to teach me how to play the outfield, and I didn't care because as a young player, I wanted to just hit. As long as I get up to the plate, I didn't care what position, and he could put defense in there for me and change in the 7th, 8th inning if he wanted to. But we played the outfield. I played first base. I had Gil Hodges there to help me, and that was the start of my career. And then I was there for the next 18 years.
Wow.
And it was a lot of fun. I saw a lot of good times, bad times, and some ugly times.
Yeah.
But the fans were always there supporting us, and that was the great thing about playing in New York.
So when you were there in that spring training and comes to an end and you know that you're going to make the team, how did you feel?
Well, we had to play 3 games going north, and they told me, well, you made the club for now, but the season starts, in 4 or 5 days. We'll see how you do going north, because now the ball clubs have had their whole club. So we stopped in Baltimore, we played Norfolk and Baltimore, etc. And I think the next to last game of spring training, I had 3 home runs against the Baltimore Orioles, who were a good ball club back in then. And Casey went over to George and said, George, we can't send this kid out. We might have something here. And of course, I started opening day at the Polo Grounds. I started in right field, and I think I hit cleanup at 18 years of age.
Wow. So many memorable moments in your career. Let's start with your All-Star season, 1965. What stands out about that?
Well, that was the year that actually I gave up my uniform number. I think I was 21. I used to be number 21, and I got number 7, but it was great. It started off great. It seemed like I started off every spring pretty good. And then, the pitchers, they get to know you. You struggle a little bit, but it was great. When I was on the All-Star team, I was 20 years of age, and I looked around. I think everyone on the team, but Johnny Callison and myself, and he was a very good player for Philadelphia, made the Hall of Fame.
Right.
I said I couldn't believe.
That has to be a surreal experience.
Alongside is Willie Mays and Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron. It was tremendous to play on those guys. I think the first basemen were Willie McCovey and Stargell. It was crazy. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Here I am, 20 years of age, in the All-Star game in Minnesota. And we won the game, and back in those days, it was more of a game that they wanted to win because it decided the World Series. Not only that, the league wanted to capture the game. And Gene Mark was the manager, and I didn't play. 4 or 5 guys didn't get in the game. That's how serious they took the game. And from that day on, I disliked Gene Mark because I said, here I was 20, get to the All-Star game, and you don't get a chance to play in it. And we all sat there, watched the game, and I think they nationally won 5-4. And Willie Mays played 9 innings. Now you wouldn't think of it now in the All-Star game. These guys, they play everybody, and that's the way it should be. It's an exhibition game, but I didn't get to it. And for the rest of my career, I disliked Gene Mark. I held a grudge against him, and I probably tried a little bit harder against him all the time. And when I was ready to retire, I got a phone call from Gene Mark. He was the manager out at Minneapolis. And my agent at the time said he wanted me to go out there to play, and I turned him down. I held a grudge at the end. Of course, today it might be a little different. You'd go back and play a couple more years, but I retired when I was 34. I was going to be 35 that winter, so I could have played a couple more years.
Having that experience, even not being able to play, but being around those players, is that something for you where it's intimidating or more of a motivating experience?
Well, it's not intimidating, but you still get the thrill of being in a ball game like that because you know how important it was, and that was your goal. Your goal in baseball when you sign a contract is obviously winning a World Series, getting in the World Series. Because not everyone gets that opportunity, and from an individual standpoint, if you make the All-Star team, you're one of the better players in the league, and it really gives you a thrill to play that thing. It's the recognition that you deserve. Baseball is a team sport, but individually you stand out. You're out in the field when you make an error. You're by yourself. When you're up at the plate and strike out or hit a home run, you're on your own. So even though it's a team sport and that's the only way to win, you do a lot of things individually that make you stand out.
So back to the Mets. A couple years later, a pitcher by the name of Tom Seaver joins the team. What was that like, having Tom come on board?
Well, you know a star when you see one, and Tom came up and joined the ball club. He was very mature for his age, and I say that because I look at myself. I was 17. I'm immature at 17.
Right.
I'm playing games. He came out of college, but you could see he went into the service a little bit, and he came out. He was a star when he first put his cleats on and went out to the ballpark. He conducted himself very professional. This was not a game to him. This was a business, and he did it. From day one, he controlled the pitching mound when he was on it. He didn't fool around prior to the game. He went out there before the game and made sure he was conducting business. So we knew we had a star. We were very lucky to, I guess, draft him in that special lottery back in those days. Otherwise, the Braves would have had him, had another great pitcher. So Tom was our star. He was our leader from day one. And I'll tell you what, I played with him for 10, 11 years. He was a great competitor and a great teammate.
What are some of your favorite memories of playing with Tom?
Well, he was so competitive that whenever he went on the field, we knew he had a good chance of winning. He changed the odds. Even though the Mets was still a young ball club that was developing, he was the guy that was very competitive out there. Between Tom and Jerry Koosman, that was his two good pitchers that controlled the games. Seaver controlled every ball game. When he started the game, he got better as the game got on. He got stronger during the game, and he controlled the action out there. And you didn't have to worry about him looking for help in the third or fourth inning. You knew the bullpen could rest that whole day, made the team better, and made everybody better. We were more competitive, and when you know you have a chance of winning, you play better.
Right.
Because you don't want to screw up in a ball game where you're struggling. And Tom could have had a lot more victories. We didn't have a great offense. We didn't score a lot of runs for him, but he kept us in the game. Casey always said, if the other team doesn't score, you got a chance of winning. And you know what?
Yeah.
He was right, because Seaver kept you in the ball game right till the end. And if you had to go to the bullpen, it might be for an out or two, but look how many complete games he had. He was part of that great group of pitchers that were around in the 60s and 70s. I mean, there were so many of them. Their goal was to go 9 innings, not to pitch a good game. You call a good game to Tom Seaver at 5 innings, he'd laugh at you. He would say, get away, I had a terrible day. He was a great competitor.
Yeah. So where should we move on to next? 1969, I feel like that was a pretty memorable year for the New York Mets. Walk me through that season.
Well, it started out, Gil Hodges had joined the ball club in '68 as the manager coming over from Washington. We had made a trade originally, to get him. And he took us to spring training, and he walked us around the field, and he said, '68 was a bad year. We lost, we didn't, I think we were 98 losses or whatever it was, but we lost a lot of close ball games. He said, you got to learn how to win those close games, and if you do, everyone does something a little bit more than they did the previous year, we're going to be a pretty good ball club. So we started the spring with a positive attitude, not knowing we were going to win a pennant, obviously. But as the season progressed, we believed in Gil. He was a great manager. He did everything to help the ball club win. He's the kind of manager you want, because he made the defensive changes, he made pinch hitting changes. He did what you had to win, and he didn't like mental mistakes. And he pointed them out, not in front of the other players. He didn't want to embarrass you. He called you in the office. He didn't say a whole lot, but he asked you what you did wrong on the field, why you're sitting next to him in the clubhouse. And you had to explain to him what went on, and he wanted to hear that you're not going to do it again, because then he wouldn't have an opportunity to play you. He would sit you down. So we learned through his fundamentals how to be a good ball club. And with our pitching staff and our defense, they were both good. So we got a good chance of winning, and it comes middle of the season, we finally get to 500. We had never been to 500 at all, in all the years that we started. But we got to 500. We were playing good baseball in California. That was always a losing streak for us, going to California between the Giants and Dodgers. They had great pitching. And of course, you know, they beat us. But that year we came back, we won every series in our coast. We beat the Giants and the Dodgers out there. We came back to New York to face the Cubs, and we were at 500. We were a hot ball club, and then of course we played the Cubs and we wound up sweeping them,
Yep.
which was, I think, the turning point in the year, because they were up by 10 games when they came into New York, and Leo was popping off. He was talking all negative stuff and, you know, making fun of the Mets that we weren't going to last, and we sweep them in New York, and had crazy things happening. The Black Cat,
Right.
you know, comes out in front of Leo and Ron Santo. You know, we beat Fergie Jenkins the first game. Seaver almost pitches a near perfect game in the second game, and we beat the Cubs 4 in a row. And now we're a few games over 500, and we're going in the right direction. Never realizing we were still going to win, but we kept winning. And of course, the second half of the season, we won 39 or 40 games in the second half there. You know, we had a tremendous record in the last 2 months of the season. We were great coming down the stretch.
Do you remember anything specific after that series with the Cubs within the clubhouse? Did you guys talk about anything, like we're on to something here, or was it just a continuous?
You know, we were playing good baseball, you know, and winning is contagious, and so is losing.
Yeah.
You know, but when you have a winning staff out there and you're going out there, everybody can't wait to get to the ballpark and play and contribute. We made a great trade halfway through the season. We picked up Don Clendon. He platooned with me. Gil Hodges loved to platoon. He convinced every player that it was in everyone's best interest if we all played and was ready to play every day, and he was going to platoon them. We didn't like it. The players didn't like it, because you want an opportunity to play every day.
Right.
It affects your numbers. So everyone is affected with a platoon system, but the manager convinced us we were a stronger ball club like that. Like I said, he made a trade. It helped us because everyone was ready to contribute when you were put in the game. So we had 25 players against the other teams. The Cubs had the best 9 players in baseball probably in each position. They had a great team. They tired out in July and August. By the time August came, the Cubs couldn't play. We were putting players in, so everybody on our team in '69 contributed. That's why it was the Miracle Mets, and we were known as a team, because if you say we had a 25th man, let's say our 3rd string catcher or a 4th string catcher, J.C. Martin, he did things to help. Duffy Dyer, our 2nd string catcher. Everyone contributed, so if you look position by position, we platooned, but we all had all-star seasons at each position. Everyone contributed. I think we had only 2 guys that played regular, 3. You had Buddy Harrelson, and then you had Cleon Jones and Tommy Agee. But they were taken out many times. So Gil knew how to utilize his players, and he made the difference. There are plenty of managers in baseball that are unqualified to manage.
Right.
Back when I played, there were half a dozen in baseball that shouldn't be managers. They couldn't manage a little league team, but they did. They were in baseball a long time, and they got that position. Gil Hodges was a winner, and if he would have had a longer career as a manager, he could have made the Hall of Fame as a manager, because he didn't make mistakes. In the 3rd inning, he was thinking about changes that were going to happen in the 7th and 8th inning. So you prepared yourself, and he didn't fool the players. If he was going to put you in for defense today, next week he was going to put you in for defense in the same situation. So you weren't being fooled, you prepared, you got loosened up, you did things. Same as pinch hitting. He didn't just go point at you in the 8th inning and say, you're the pinch hitter. You'd be pinch hitting late in the ball game. You had a role, and you had to accept that role, and we did. We became a good team, and we could have won more pennants if Gil survives and doesn't pass on. But I'm so grateful that he's getting into the Hall of Fame, because he was a great player, a great human being, and a great manager for the New York Mets.
Sounds like it. So 1969, you guys go all the way, win the Mets' first World Series. What is it like to be a member of that team?
Well, you still remembered in New York, 50 some odd years later. It's amazing that the fans still think about '69. Everyone was there. Everyone took a little piece of the grass. Everyone celebrated with us, especially the older fans. They will never let 69 pass. And I'll tell you what, you can walk down the city and they still want to talk about it. It's great. It's a great feeling to be part of it.
What stands out the most to you about the World Series?
Well, it was over before it started. I mean, we lost the first game, but it didn't excite us. We didn't get frazzled. Jerry Kuzman came back, pitched a good game in the second game, and we came back to New York, with Gil's platoon, the left-handers that didn't play the first two games. The left-handers starred in the playoffs. And then in the World Series, we sat the first two games, and our better offense was left-handed. And when we came back to New York, we faced Jim Palmer the third game. The lefties played that game. And as Gil using his platoon, we knocked them out in a hurry, and we beat them 5-0, and then we came back. Tommy Agee made all those great catches. Sabota made some great catches. And then we swept them 4 in a row, and it was tremendous. Baltimore was shocked. They're still in shock. Before some of the fellas have passed on, Frank Robinson to this day couldn't believe that we beat them, because they had a couple of Hall of Famers in their lineup, but they didn't have what we had. We had team spirit. We believed in ourselves, and I'll tell you what, we really played great baseball.
Yeah. And Ed, you played 18 seasons with the New York Mets. You hold the record still for most games ever played. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means that I was performing up to a certain, ability. I think my career would have been better if I would have went to the minor leagues early on. I didn't develop in the major leagues. I was hitting 250, 260 against Sandy Koufax when I was 17 years of age. I mean, it was unbelievable. I struggled against Hall of Fame pitchers. Well, so did everybody else. Once I developed, I became a 300 hitter. Later on in my career, people thought I had been around so long, but I just started so young. I could have been a better player, should have been a better player, because I knew when I developed in the beginning, every place I played, I hit over 300, and I should have hit 300 in the major leagues. I really think if I would have went to a different ball club or been utilized, the Mets had a better team early on, I would have fit in. You can't be a star individually. It's a team game, but when they put good players around me, I hit 300. And then I should have been playing, but of course then they started platooning, and that makes it bad on you.
You're a great player. You held a lot of Mets records.
Well, I did. It took David Wright about 30 years to catch me in hits. But, I set the record at Shea Stadium. I had the most hits at Shea Stadium, and I had the most games at all for the Mets. And a lot of people forget that longevity is because I didn't get hurt. I stayed around and played a lot of games, and I could have played a lot of those other games, but when they platoon you, you do what's best for the team, and you really have no control over that.
What was that decision like, after 18 years to retire? Was that difficult to make that?
Well, it was, but I think time had come. I was tired of losing. I saw us going from the bottom to the top, back to the bottom again, and that was tough. I mean, I didn't want to see another developing club. And I saw baseball changing. I saw long-term contracts. I saw players getting developed and getting 5-year contracts that didn't deserve to get 5-year contracts. When you're in last place, you should have guys competing for jobs, not giving them jobs, and I thought there was going to be a change, and it was going to be a long road back, and it was. I did it at the right time. It was a long term until they won again in '86. And of course then they had a good ball club, and the Mets were back.
But so glad that you have been part of this organization in one way or another, since the very beginning. Why was it important to you to stay with the Mets in one capacity or another?
Well, it was my home. I love New York. I mean, the fans are great to me. I mean, just to jump around at the end, if you weren't going to play regularly and have a chance to win, I was ready to go. And of course, New York's a great town, and I love it, and I still love the Mets, and I still go out and do certain things public relations-wise. And anytime you can be with a class organization, they've been good to me, so I appreciate it.
Ed, 60 years. What is it like to know the Mets celebrating 60 years this season?
Just hard to believe that 60 years have passed since I signed at 62, and I'm still fairly healthy. But it's a great organization, and they've done a lot of good things for the city. And of course, I hope they have a pennant winner this year. I'm going to be out there celebrating with them.
Ed, we look forward to seeing you there, hopefully. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.